Well, hello. My name is Edward, your host, and welcome back to HIV Unfiltered. Today, I have with me a beautiful young woman. Her name is Alyssa Crawford, and she's been doing a lot of work in the advocacy world. Before we get into it, I want you guys to know that this is a safe space. You can ask any questions in the chat or, DM me as well. But this is a safe space, and I want you to feel comfortable and learn and grow in any capacity. So let's just jump into it. Alyssa, do you want to tell us a little brief about yourself?
Thank you, Edward. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. A little bit about me. I am 33 years old. I'm a mom of two. I've been an advocate now for almost 10, a little over 10 years, actually. And yeah, I'm a lifetime survivor and I'm happy to be here.
What got you into advocacy work?
Well,
What was the turning
initially,
point?
I wasn't involved. Okay. A lot of individuals have been advocates since childhood, and I was not one of those. So I went to a camp growing up called Camp Hope. And once I stopped going to that as a teenager, I eventually went on to the extended version of Camp Hope, so to speak. And that camp is called Universal Teens, excuse me. So Universal Teens. And it is for individuals who are living with HIV, whether you're born with it or not, but it's for individuals age, I believe, 18 to 21. And
Hmm.
there we actually talk about our status. We engage in various activities that help stimulate or enhance our professional development. And it was at that camp that I not only accepted myself with my status, I also wanted to become an advocate and inform the world to, I guess, prevent further harm to those who, at some point suffered within, their diagnosis, or just
Yeah.
individuals who are highly impacted by stigma. And so that camp was really the turning point and the catalyst to my advocacy journey.
When did you find out that you were HIV positive? Was that something that you've known like since childhood, or is that something that you kind of found out later?
Yeah, I knew it since I was about 10 years old. At 10, I didn't know what to ask when it came to HIV. I knew HIV was something that I was not supposed to, yell from the mountaintops, but it wasn't something that I even had prior knowledge on. Like, I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't know just how detrimental it may be. I wasn't having sex, so it wasn't accompanied by a conversation that centered protecting myself. It was just, informing me of my status, and that was the reason why I took medication. And as a 10-year-old, I simply went into the next room and continued watching cartoons. It wasn't until middle school when I learned about the stigma that was associated with HIV. Hearing like jokes in sex ed and, small little things from my peers, small comments, from my peers, not directed towards me, but just about the virus. And then once I got into eighth grade, there was a rumor that went around about me being in the book with kids with AIDS. And that was something that just really haunted me. So I didn't learn about HIV. When I first learned about my status, I just learned about it, and I don't think that's something that we don't really consider the stigmatic component that comes with learning your HIV status. We think
Right.
about HIV and learning your status, but a lot of people, we don't really know what that means, because as someone who gets diagnosed later on down the line, they know the impact of HIV. But as a child,
Right.
you really don't. So I mean, I learned my status as a child, but I didn't learn its impact until I was a teenager, and it wasn't the diagnosis that gave me the shell shock. It was the stigma.
Okay. Now you mentioned that there's this rumor about this book of people with AIDS.
Hmm.
Can you kind of clarify a little bit about that? Like,
Yeah.
what is that book and why was it even started?
Hmm. So at Camp Hope that I attended when I was a child, again, that camp is for individuals, or it was for individuals born with HIV. And so each year we would attend camp, and we had a photographer that would, go around and take pictures of us. And at the end of the camp, we would receive a memory book, and we will all sign each other's memory books. It was a beautiful trinket to symbolize the amazing experience, the experience of living life, and no strings attached. And that was such a momentous occasion and a tangible example of that occasion. It was beautiful, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But Fort Lauderdale, which is for where I'm from, and whatever space that you're in, no matter how vast the area may be or the environment may be, once you're in a certain bracket or whatever the case may be, it can seem like a small world. So for instance, I'm from Fort Lauderdale, but I was raised in Larkdale, and my jurisdiction, my educational jurisdiction was set for a certain school, so my boundaries. And I went to a elementary school that a lot of other kids went to in my neighborhood, and then we all went to the same middle school and following the same high school or similar high schools. Even if those some of us were spread it, we still had a lot. We were basically in close encounters with one another, right? So Fort Lauderdale is a large city, but it's still small, so to speak. Like we still knew everyone. And I don't really know how this information got out. I can only, based on the information I have right now as living as a woman age 33 and just going back from, interviewing certain classmates or friends, I'm just connecting the dots. And I believe that someone may have went to camp with me, or and someone may have went to camp with me and they end up seeing the book. And while they were looking at maybe their friend or their family member and their experience, they may have recognized me in the book. And that is like the best conclusion, I was able to draw. And eventually it became this ugly rumor. It may have been a true rumor, but yeah, that's what it became. And it was something that I was hiding from for a while.
Man, that's crazy. Kids can be the worst sometimes, They really can. Let's jump into like what you're doing now. So you went public with your HIV at 19 and became the first openly HIV positive campus queen. Can you tell me what a campus queen is and what gave you the courage to step into the spotlight and talk about your status?
Yeah, so a campus queen, someone who is voted on by their peers, or maybe they win a pageant and they're, elected the Miss Junior or the Miss Sophomore or Miss Black and Gold for the Alpha pageant, right? Which is the initial pageant that I enrolled in so that I can come out to my campus, so to speak. And so basically, I signed up for this pageant. They had the Miss Black and Gold pageant put on by a Black fraternity at my school, Florida A&M University. And I knew that I was already public in the world and that I was doing a disservice to my community, to my peers, to my campus if I did not bring this same awareness, right at home. And so I was trying to think of a creative way to do so that would, not only bring the crowd, but then also make sure that I have everyone, or enough people, around so that I can do this, so that it can at least reach as many ears as possible. And so I enrolled in the pageant, and during the talent portion, I recited a poem that I wrote entitled "What's My Status?" And basically the poem is basically giving you a rundown, walking you through life as someone being born with HIV, but they're also letting you know, or letting the audience know, that I am not my status. So
Right.
what's my status? My status is actually not HIV. My status is Alyssa Crawford, and I so happen to be HIV positive. And so, yeah, that was a great experience. And after that, I ran for the Miss Junior attendant, which is basically the Miss Junior of the campus. So we have
Sorry.
No, you're good. We had a royal court, as what we call them, where we have the Mr. and Mrs. FAMU, the Mr. and Mrs. Orange and Green, the Miss Junior, the Miss Sophomore, the Miss Freshman. And they would, represent the school. And yeah, they were just leaders of the school. And I was able to become Miss Junior.
So I was actually going to go back into that. That was my next question. What's the boldest thing you said or did on stage that made people rethink their assumptions about HIV? Was it that poem, or was it like a different moment?
On stage, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It was that. A lot of people, growing up, even those of us who are lifetime survivors, we know of HIV. We've learned of HIV, whether it's from stereotypes, whether it's from, our parents or caregivers informing us of our status, or, sex ed. But people have never came to us or informed us that there were other people being born with it. Even going to camps where we knew other children were living with it the same way we were living with it. It's just something you don't think of. We never saw lifetime survivors on any platform, or someone saying that, hey, I was born with it and I'm 30 years old and I'm normal, or I'm healthy and I'm okay and I've had children and things like that. Like, I've never seen that. The image of someone living with HIV growing up was always someone who had they had
Sores
a sick look.
everywhere. Yeah, yeah. Well, I was like saying sores everywhere. They looked like,
It was
yeah,
a very
sick.
sick look. And I
Yeah.
understand why they use that approach. It was a scare tactic, possibly, and then also it was also just real life. Like, outside of it being a scare tactic, this is also someone's life. And so they were using either themselves or maybe the graphics to drive a message home to us. But it was not a harm reduction approach as it pertains to someone who was born with it, because ultimately you think, is that going to be me, or that's not me? And I don't want to be associated with anything that has anything to do with HIV, which is why I actually stopped going to camp early. My isolation looked a little bit differently than the typical lifetime survivor, because we all go through isolation at some point. And my isolation looked like me not wanting to converse or be in contact any further with my friends who I went to camp with. I was really trying to run away from this status, run away from the idea of HIV. I stopped taking my medicine because I knew that wasn't me, and I didn't have anyone to turn to. I didn't have anyone to speak to. I knew nothing
Yeah.
about therapy, and even if I did, I didn't have anyone that I can trust, no one that looked like me, no one who I felt like was relatable, or
Hmm.
someone, again, trust. I didn't trust anyone with this information, with these fears, with these apprehensions. I didn't feel like I can speak to anyone about it. So I dealt with it the way I knew how, which was an unhealthy way, which was an emotionally undeveloped way. And yeah.
If you knew someone who is 8 years old, 10 years old, who was born with it or got it through a blood transfusion or whatever the case may be, um, what would you want to say to them to make them not as scared of as what people are learning about HIV at that age?
So an 8-year old.
Like, what would you say to your younger self,
hmm
just so you can get rid of that, like, okay, I don't want to feel like I have HIV. That's not me. I'm going to stop taking my meds. How do you, what are you going to say to that child so that they grow up knowing that it's okay that they have HIV and that they can still grow up normally?
So I would, okay, if I'm looking at it from my 8-year-old self who did not know the status, I'm gonna just say 10 because I didn't learn my status until age 10.
Right.
I might give myself more of a rundown as to what HIV is, and also inform myself that it's okay for us not to go into depth with this conversation, because right now you may not have questions, because a lot of questions that I did have, they didn't come until my teenage years when I was developing. It's a lot of things that can't be really addressed unless you're actually in the unless you're in a certain lane. So for instance, like with HIV, when it was told to me, like when my status was told to me, I wasn't really able to it didn't follow a conversation of, hey, when the time comes, protect yourself. I'm 10 years old. So I think everything that I was able to get at that moment, I received, which was just the knowledge that I had my status, like, hey, you take medication. And this is the reason. I didn't know what that
Mhm.
meant. You could tell me that I had diabetes. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't understand the
Mhm.
severity of it. As someone who would be delivering that information, I will also prepare myself for questions um, at a later date. Like, prepare myself like for a conversation that will happen in the future, because I don't think this is a one conversation topic at all. You're going to have to, bring it up again. You're going to have to repeat certain things, and you're going to have to approach it from different angles. So
Mhm.
the teenage version of myself, when I was suffering the most, that is the conversation that would be a much more meatier. So that adolescent will be the meat and potatoes of my trauma-induced, stigma-induced depression. And so
Okay.
at that time, maybe like at 17, probably like at 18 when I was still hiding, I would really break down the fact that you can live a normal life with HIV. I will probably also really give myself a very transparent conversation, because I feel like conversations amongst individuals living with HIV are not the same conversations to other people not living with HIV. I would inform myself of what you really need to do to protect yourself. Not only use condoms, but I probably would inform myself that, yeah, I hid my medication too, and this is a good hiding place. Okay, don't put it in your medicine compartment inside the bathroom. No, put it over here. Because people are nosy, and you don't need to let them know information that they're not entitled to. And also, this is going to get a little personal. So we do have criminalization laws here in Florida and throughout the nation, and they do not work in the best interest of those who are living with HIV. They do not represent the current science that has taken place and that has been found. They do not represent U equals U, undetectable is untransmittable. They do not represent that if someone is virally suppressed, they are pose no harm to someone not living with HIV. And as a result, someone can be criminalized, and I'm sure someone can be criminalized for non-disclosure. I would take it a step further to inform them of how that may look. You may disclose your status, but if there's no recollection of you disclosing your status, then it's really your word against their word. And I will
Yeah.
also inform myself what self-criminalization would look like and how to avoid that. I solely believe in documentation and to be careful of what you do document, what is not documented. I will inform them, like, if you're actually disclosing your status, you need to secretly record someone or whatever the case may be to protect yourself.
Yeah.
I am for people in general, but I'm also for communities that I represent, that I'm a part of, and I'm all for fairness as well. And a lot of things that I've seen, I disagree with. And I also see these things that certain things that have happened have been preventable. Okay. And that
Mm.
includes criminalization, that includes ostracization, that includes isolation, even death. A lot of individuals living with HIV, a lot of lifetime survivors have perished because we have felt
Yeah.
hopeless. Okay. And I know a lot of times we like to highlight stigma, but I refuse for stigma to continue being a scapegoat to a lack of resource or the availability of those resources. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. What would be the perfect law that protects people with HIV and without? Because right now, I know that the stigma is what's also preventing people to get tested.
Hmm.
So, what would be you know, the perfect law that protects us both?
That's a great
Since
question.
I know I just just came up with it.
I know. I love it. I love it. Honestly, this is the way I look at it. I feel like the current criminalization laws, and some laws are much more strenuous than others. Some laws are much more horrendous than others, for sure. All the laws, I feel like they are HIV negative facing, right? They are working in the betterment, they're working as protagonists to those who are not living with HIV. And that closes out our community. I believe that individuals who are not living with HIV, or whatever the case may be, if you are trying to put up this case, or your stance is someone exposed you to HIV or they did not disclose, I would love to know. And this would just be for this law that we're making up, right?
Mhm.
The law that we're making up, and then also some cases that I've seen. I would love to see what was the person who's not living with HIV, what was their role in it? Like, can you show proof that you've properly vetted this sexual partner that that you're saying you had sex with? Can you show text messages or documentation where you asked for their medical information? Can you show proof that you both went and got tested together and you both were able to view one another's test results? What was your role in this whole process? Because I see a lot of times where individuals living with HIV are, and this, I'm gonna give this one example, are living in situations where they feel like they may be stuck, because someone accepted their status. So there is a higher chance of someone living with HIV to engage in intimate partner violence, right? And in intimate partner violence, you have coercion, with someone living with HIV, you have coercion, you have someone threatening to expose your status. Sometimes we do not disclose initially, and then eventually as a relationship becomes serious, they disclose, and the other partner during contingent can say, hey, well, you didn't inform me, so I'm going to tell my family. I'm going to tell, this person and that person, and it's just a lot of shaming that goes with it. And there's a lot of situations, just going back to the gist of it. What is your role in sleeping with someone who is HIV positive? Was this a one night stand? Did you properly ask them for medication? Because if it is, for their medical facts, if it is a one night stand, so what? But what is your role? I don't think that the role of anyone's health should be on one person. That needs to be a dual solution or a dual approach for sure.
Yeah, it takes two to tango.
It does, yeah. And so the same
'Cause
way
if
we're
not,
looking at
then
it
it's
as it pertains to reproductive rights, we need to address it like that. It's just one, again, it does take two to tango. And then I think the law is just so morphed, or it can be, like when it comes to an individual who was sexually molested. Sometimes that victim has to come forth and show hardcore evidence sometime in place of a rape kit. If a rape kit was not, present, or if there's no DNA, then that victim really has to come forth and re-traumatize themselves and really show proof or sway the jury that this person commit this crime against them. Well, where is the accountability being held for others who are, proclaiming that this person exposed them to HIV? Because we
yeah,
don't see, most of the times we do not see two positive statuses. Most of the times we see a negative status and a positive status. So there's no proof that HIV was really exposed unless that person with HIV says, yeah, we slept together, but I told them my status. I don't have proof you told me that status, but I do have proof that you slept together because you just incriminated yourself. And going back to wording, self-incrimination is a big thing. And I would just
yeah,
do some type of one-on-one included in my conversation of how not to criminalize yourself while living with HIV.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay, so now another question. I know this is probably a little too personal, but do your kids know about your status? Do you talk to them about that?
They're young now.
Okay, they're too young. Okay, okay, okay. Now, both as a research and data director for Lifetime Survivor Network and part of the Dandelion movement, what's one pattern in the data about people born with HIV that shocks people when they first hear about it?
I believe it is really just the dynamics of what it means to be a lifetime survivor of HIV. Initially, and this is something that I realized as I got more into this field, as I started speaking more about it and engaging with community, a lot of people think that it's easier to be born with HIV. It may be some privilege there. I'm not going to, deny that. But a lot of people really misconstrue that it is easier to be born with HIV, and it's not. A lot of people misidentify or misjudge the dynamics of being born with HIV. There is a recent study that just came out in last year from out of India that analyzed the psychosocial components or effects of being born with HIV in adults. And so out of that study alone, there was about 90% of the participants who reported a death of either one or two parents. So when you're considering HIV and being born with it, the mind develops differently. Trauma develops differently in an undeveloped mind versus a developed mind. So trauma being exposed to someone at age 3 and age 5 and age 8 and age 10, it's going to present differently than trauma appearing at age 16, at 23, at 32. Outside of that, a lot of lifetime survivors have dealt with not only HIV, but the trauma that comes with the HIV epidemic, as well as the crack epidemic. A lot of us have had exposure to our parents suffering from addiction. And when
Yeah.
it comes to like the trauma of HIV, it is just a multi-layered, faceted situation. And I think when it comes to fine-tooth combing it, we have to take those approaches, because not only are we dealing with status, HIV is just, those three letters, but we're also dealing with hospital visits. I'm 33 years old, born in 1992. Before there was even a pediatric clinic for individuals like me, I had a nurse coming to my house taking my blood, and I remember that, waking up in hospitals, watching my friends die at age 8. Like that is exposure that no child should, ever have to go through. And if they do, because I had a cousin who had a friend who passed away from cancer when she was a young age, like let's say maybe 7 or so. But to see that repeatedly as a child, it takes a different toll on you. And it's not normal. It's uncommon and
No.
it's not normal. So, like I said, I do recognize some of the privilege that may come with being positive, but I think the whole idea of privilege is misconstrued anyways. It's privilege because when you tell people, yeah, I was born with it, you automatically get sympathy or empathy. And it's because I could say I'm living with HIV, or yeah, I have HIV. I'm like, well, how'd you get it? Well, I was born with
Right.
it. Like the reaction, it softens, so that
Yeah.
privilege there, because if I wasn't born with it, how would you feel? You would still, have whatever preconceived notion that you initially led with, right? But
Yeah.
then the
They almost,
misconstruction comes in because you're thinking, now I'm precious because I was born with it. And then now it goes to, what are you trying to say about my mama?
yeah. Because it does, like, I mean, that's where the term like miracle baby comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like people look at us as victims,
Yeah.
so they kind of see us a little differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. I never really looked at it in that way, but I totally see it because yeah, we get, free healthcare. We
Yes.
have all those things that like, I guess yeah,
You get free healthcare?
yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't.
it's the state. The state pays for it.
Yeah, see, I'm in Florida. See, yeah, that's
Come out
different.
here.
Politics.
Come
Listen,
out. I know, I know. Wake up, Florida.
listen.
Now, you've built your career in autonomy and enforced choice. What's the cruelest irony of HI criminal laws taking that power away from the very people fighting to?
Let's jam packed.
Yeah. So you've built your career on autonomy and informed choice. What's the cruelest irony of HIV criminal law, and does it take away the power for people fighting to reclaim it?
Yeah, definitely. Again, I'm gonna repeat it. That's a jam-packed question. So, the
Yeah.
irony when it comes to criminalization law is what I said earlier, is the fact that we don't consider all parties involved when it comes to making these laws. Not only do we not consider the science, that goes into HIV advancements, but
Hmm.
we discredit those who were willful and willing participants. Okay. There are
Hmm.
some occurrences where people have went to the police in order to, as a form of weaponization, right? Like they
Hmm.
just were being nasty or they were upset. It was a domestic dispute in which they felt that the person was doing them wrong. It might have been a breakup and they wanted to get some type of vengeance. We have documented cases like this, and it doesn't represent this idea that the world, thinks of when it comes to someone not disclosing their status. When the world thinks of someone not disclosing their status, they go off groupthink. And I can't stand groupthink. That's the whole consensus behind social media, which is why it can be dangerous if used incorrectly. And so when you see the headlines such and such is in jail for non-disclosure or HIV exposure, because that sounds so much worse. If someone is not
Yeah.
thinking or reading with comprehension, they're for some reason translating exposure to transmission, and they have this idea that someone with HIV who's highly infectious is just running rampant throughout the world, and putting your sons and your daughters at risk. And, but unfortunately, it doesn't take in the humanistic component of the person living with HIV. It doesn't consider
Yeah.
this could possibly be someone who you love. Like, what if this was your actual nephew? Or this was your daughter? What if this was your mom? The mistakes that we make as human beings, as adult human beings now, consider the mistakes that our parents may have made. Our parents either living or not living, either living with HIV or not living with HIV. Like, consider the mistakes they have made, considering your own mistakes, right? And yeah, I think that is one of the biggest crimes against, or that is one of the most dangerous ironies to criminalization law, is not considering the humanistic component outside of the scientific advancements. Do I think it's going to pose a risk for those advocates or activists actively in the fight? I don't. I think they're used to it. Once you're in this world, like once you're in this particular realm of advocacy, and like you kind of see how the methods of war is, and like the war on drugs, there is a war as it pertains to HIV. At some point, there was a war on the science, and now it's war on policy, but we're actively, fighting against it. And it's not going to happen overnight. Texas has been just as bad as Florida, but there has been reform as it pertains to criminalization in Texas, which is a major stride. So yeah, I think that it's not going to hold the activists back. If anything,
It's going to make it stronger.
yeah, because how could you not?
Yeah.
If you're signing up for this role, there are some things that comes with it, and that may also include being burnt out. But you take a break, you sit back, you hibernate, and you come back out swinging. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like rebuilding a muscle. Like when you work out every single time, you tear your muscle and then it grows back stronger. So it's kind of like that.
I like that.
Now, who was the first person who actually saw you for you and not your HIV status? And are they still around in your life today?
Yes. I had a few people. My family.
You don't got to say names or nothing, but yeah.
Yeah, my family, my friends, and I'm still friends with some of the friends that I grew up with to this day. Like my best friends from childhood, my family, of course. And yeah.
Did they look at you privileged when you told them? Did they look
I would
at you like,
have to ask them that. That's never a conversation I've had with them. I'm not sure. I just know with my friends, when I disclose to them, they said, "Oh, okay, it doesn't change anything." I don't even know the whole reason why I disclosed to them, but I did. But yeah, it didn't change anything. Once I came off to college, I was not public until college years. And when I came off to school, I already had my set of friends my freshman year. And then it wasn't until going off into sophomore year when I decided to come out publicly with my status. And I did. And my friends loved me. And they actually became advocates after that. We used to.
sick?
Yeah, we were all in this organization called the RCP movement, the Respect Yourself, Check Yourself, and Protect Yourself movement, spearheaded by Donald Thomas and Kamaria Lafray at the time. It was an amazing organization, and they all joined it, and we were, just dorm storming and street storming it up. One of the beautiful things about this organization was the shirt. And the shirts on the front said, "I have HIV" in bold capital red letters. On the back, it said, "If only it was that easy to tell, get tested." And it was basically to change the whole notion that HIV had a face. And it made people stop and turn around. And once they turned around, that's the only way they were able to see the statement on the back. It was a aha, a gotcha. I made you look, I made you think. And so it was amazing. And I just love the fact that my friends were able to not only support me, but just support the movement, support the knowledge enhancement and awareness that was being made at that moment and spread at that moment. I loved it. Like, it was an amazing time to be alive on FAMU's campus back in the days, and still now, of course.
Yeah, you're right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you've got one of the coolest little life stories about your advocacy work.
Thank
You've
you.
you've been doing it for a long time now. Was there ever a moment when you felt like you wanted to quit and not do it anymore?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. When I first became an advocate, it was amazing. I became an advocate because I accepted myself when I was at that camp, like on day one or night one. I remember just looking up, again, being a girl who was struggling with isolation, who, when I first came off to college, I felt like I made it. I felt like I got away. It felt like I was running for so long and I finally made it out those woods. That's how I felt when I first came off to college. It felt like a fresh start, and it was, but
Mhm.
in various ways. And when I went to excuse me, I initially reached out to my social worker and I told her that I want to be a camp counselor because I realized that after I was able to get a break and after I was able to, escape, so to speak, it gave me time to reflect. And in that reflection, I realized that I did not want someone else to suffer how I did because it was by the God's grace. And I'm a woman of faith. It was by the grace of God that I felt like I made it because I know that that was a situation, that isolation, that silence kills is it's true, very true. I could have died. And not taking medication, being in denial, not taking medication. I feel like a lot of us have gone through periods where we actively taken ourselves off of medication. Why? Because we were feeling good, or we didn't believe that that medication was for us. We thought maybe science or the doctors were lying because no one really was able to break it down, break down the mechanisms behind us taking our medication and why it's, so important for us to do so. But whatever those gaps were, I feel like I could have easily slipped through them and I didn't. And thankfully I made it through. And I want to make sure that I was able to give back to someone who may have been struggling like me, but did not have the words, did not have the courage to speak, or what have you. And so she said in order for me to be a camp counselor, I had to first go to the leadership camp. They basically wanted to see how I was going to act because as a teenager, going through all the things I went through between my status, things at home, I had
Yeah,
some behavior problems. Yes. And so
we all did.
they just wanted to make sure I
We
was
all
going to,
did.
act correctly. And I did. And I received so much more than I bargained for when I went to that leadership camp, Universal Teams. And again, like I said, the first night I realized that these adults, these counselors, they actually know our statuses and they love us and they're hugging us and they're dancing with us, and they're eating food with us. Like I was so taken back. I don't that was my first time ever realizing that. And after that, I realized, well, if there are strangers who would love us and enjoy us, why would not have that same love and enjoyment and acceptance for myself? So not only did I accept my status at that moment, I accepted all of me. With the status, of course. And then I just felt like I want to come out and again, screaming from the mountaintops because not only did I want to spread awareness and change this whole idea of HIV having a face, but it was also some anger there that I was unpacking. It was anger from those years of hiding and those years of trying to escape this ugly rumor, that went on and that followed me from eighth grade to high school. So it was some anger there because all I knew was whispers, and people saying things indirectly. It was one person who literally said, hey, I heard you have AIDS, like out of everyone, and it was in passing, it was very quick. I was a little girl, so, it was just you could probably imagine like the shell shock and the trauma that came out of that. But not only did I want to reverse, that impact and make sure that it didn't continue for anyone else, but I also felt like I want to address and face the bullies. So it was something like that. It was like a coming out with a vengeance, if you will.
Yeah.
Because once I became public, I dared someone, not, verbally, but like on the inside, I was daring someone to come, at me with with the ignorance. But even when someone did come at me with questions, it was more from an inquisitive standpoint than
Yeah.
than some things, than a, condemning standpoint. Yeah. The only issue was when I did come out and I became an advocate, I prepared to be ostracized by the world. The world accepted me. I was ostracized by the community though. Now, granted, there was definitely a lot of support in the community, but like how you could have like a towel, if it's wet, it's heavier than that dry towel. And if that towel is wet, it appears darker than how it would appear if it was dry. And so that's kind of like
Mhm.
how I felt like when I became public with my status, although there were people who were very supportive of me, the journey, and my advocacy, there were also some people and their reaction that was on the unwelcoming side. And that's something I did not prepare for. And that actually put a hole in my advocacy. That actually helped to stop me at some point. That actually helped silence me for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but now you just can't stop being silent.
Absolutely
You're one of the
not.
loudest. Yeah, you're one of the loudest people I know.
Yeah.
Now, you're gonna start winding down, kind of getting down. If you were to pass away in 20 years,
hmm
what do you want to be known for? Or like, what do you want people to whisper about you? Is it more about who you are as a person, or is it about your advocacy work?
I think my advocacy work kind of helps to summarize who I am as a person. I think that's all involved, intertwined. And what I would like to be remembered as is someone who's tried and did not allow boundaries to hold them back or shape them. With things that I like to do in my personal life, scuba diving. I actually want to start skydiving as well. I don't really care for limits, and then once I got a taste of what it feels to be limitless and what it's like to be outside of this box that was built for me before
Mhm.
I even knew what constraints were, getting a taste of that freedom, it's been amazing, and it's also been addictive, and I want to keep going. And I want to make sure that my kids are able, to see the possibility and onwardness and what all that entails. Because when I'm not going to, the day that I'm no longer going to be here, which is inevitable, I just want to make sure that they have memory of me and they have knowledge of where they come from so that they know that they can do it too in their darkest times,
Mhm. What's one thing that you want to ask the next person that I interview?
That's a good question, Edward. Who are you interviewing?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, I do, but
Okay, we'll talk
that's a
offline.
later.
That is a great question. Maybe what is their hope for the upcoming lifetime survivors?
Okay. That's a good
We
question.
do we've made tremendous strides, and we've had a significant decrease in perinatal HIV transmission. Amazing. But we still have some who are being born, with HIV to this day. So I am curious to know collectively, what does others think? What does other lifetime survivors think about what our support pathways look like for upcoming lifetime survivors? Those who are less than 18 years old, because we have our network, we have our support
Right.
groups, but what does those who look like what does support and peer networks look like for those who are under 18? Because a lot of suffering took place when I was 16 or
Yeah.
12, so yeah.
I think I would love to do like a not even just like a USA camp, but like a world camp
hmm
where we're able to get funding for people. And if you are, I want to say 25 or older living with HIV, you should want to be a counselor
hmm
and you come to these things so that you can be like, hi, my name's Edward, to the however many kids are there, and I was born with it. And then for like, if I was that age and someone said that to me, I'd be like, my God,
Exactly.
I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one. So that's
Absolutely, absolutely. Another thing I would like to see, not necessarily like a question for like the next participant, but like in general, I would love to see like more sex positive conversations for lifetime survivors. I see those conversations with like the older generation of individuals living
hmm
with HIV, but far as a component of normalcy to oral sex. But believing that I have HIV and no one will want to, engage in that activity with me, that was something that was a constant reminder that I'm not normal, that I cannot live a
hmm
normal life. Like that can be
hmm
also equivalent to the feeling of not being able to breastfeed, or maybe I won't be able to have a vaginal birth because of the risk, or maybe I will never be able to have unprotected sex because of the risk. No one even thinks about like the oral component, but that is definitely something I've never seen addressed. And it wasn't until another interview that I said that I'm like, oh my gosh, Alyssa. But it's true. Like, I've never seen sex positive conversations for HIV positive survivors. And I know that is one thing that is like a lingering thought over our heads as it pertains to being a normal person. And so, yeah.
I'll see when I can fit that in. I think that's a good topic to bring up. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Alyssa. This has been a really very, very good little interview.
Thank you.
You've raised a lot of questions for probably a lot of people who
Mhm.
are going to be watching and also myself. So, again, thank you so much. And I will see you soon, probably this year.
I hope so. Thank you, Edward.
Yeah,
It's been a pleasure.
yeah.
Thank you for considering me.
Of course, of
It's always
course.
good to see you.
Um, it's a pleasure.
Take care.
I'll see you. Take care. All right, guys. That was awesome. It's a lot of stuff that was covered. Yeah, she's a very strong woman. I wish I had that much energy to be more of a advocate, but for some reason this is the platform that I chose. I think it works best for my personality and who I am. Yeah, I hope you guys tune in to the next one. The next one's going to be good too as well. Please, please, please reach out if you have any questions or want to talk more. Email is hivfiltered@gmail.com. See ya.